Good evening, everyone. My name is Judy Blake, and I'm with Family to Family Network in Houston, Texas. It is Wednesday night. The Astros are playing, go Stros, and we are happy to be having another training session. We will be over and you'll still be able to watch plenty of the game. So welcome back to those of you who have joined us. We appreciate it. I am joined by my colleague, Leslie Lawson. Thank you for joining, Leslie. And just a couple of quick reminders. There's lots of information. Some of it is going to be similar to what you heard last week, because we know that you need to hear this multiple times. We know that it is a lot of information. And we want to make sure that everybody understands the material. Just know that this is a safe space. If you are Spanish speaking, which I don't think anybody is right now, but if you are, please put in the chat box that you are Spanish speaking, and we will have our interpreters explain to you how to hear the Spanish translation. Please be respectful. Everybody might have a different experience and a different opinion. No opinion is wrong. It's what works for you and what works for your family. There's no silly questions, and we want you to feel comfortable asking as many questions as you like, and knowing this is a safe space. We will be sending the slides after the third presentation. Next slide, please. So ARD meetings, we know, are really challenging sometimes. They can be stressful. Leslie and I have had more than our share of ARD meetings through the years with our sons. Just remember that typically caregivers know their child, their loved one, better than anyone else. It is my hope that the people on this call don't, have their head in the sand, they're not in denial, so that if the school says, your child needs this service and you say, no, they don't, they'll be just fine, that you would listen to what the school is saying. The purpose of these training sessions is to make sure that you understand the special education process. You need to know what your rights are, because if you don't know your rights, then you don't know how to advocate for your loved one. And you want your child to receive a free and appropriate education. Just a reminder that anyone who is enrolled in charter schools, they too are responsible for following IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and they're responsible for making sure that their students receive that free and appropriate public education. So tip number 2, the IDEA manual. Leslie and I talk about this all the time. You have to read it, learn it, understand it, and know it. Because the more that you know, you will be respected by the ARD committee. Now, granted, you should be respected anyway because you are the parent, but we think it's really important that you know what your rights are, you know what services your loved one is entitled to, so that you can advocate for them. The IDEA manual is in both English and Spanish, and we've listed the links there. This is federal law. This isn't just Texas law. This isn't California law. This is not something that Judy and Leslie come up with. This is federal law that ensures that schools, public schools, serve the educational needs of students with disabilities. So you really have to read it, learn it, and understand it.
Judy?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I share a story from today?
Absolutely.
Another thing I was going to say about the IDEA manual is if you print it out, or at least part of it, and bring it with you and have it on the top stack of your papers, when the school district sees that you have that, they know you know your rights. And I think people that know their rights are treated very differently by the ARD committee. But
Absolutely.
a story from today, and a dad called and he enrolled his son who was turning 6 at the end of September, but he enrolled him before that. So that would be kindergarten. And he speaks a different language. I think he speaks French, but I could understand him. Anyway, he enrolled his son in the school and he was there a few days. Well, the few days he was there, the school kept calling him to come pick him up. He had not been identified as a student with a disability yet. And like the third or fourth day that they called him to pick him up, they said, don't bring him back. We're going to do an evaluation, but we won't get to it till December. And you have to keep him at home till then.
No.
And so the dad reached out to us, and I made several calls to the school district, to the school, and to the school district. I had a very hard time getting a hold of anybody. I was transferred to multiple people, and I did talk to somebody. HISD has a parent liaison for special ed, and they didn't seem concerned at all about what I was telling them. And so I had left a message at the campus to talk to the special ed person because I couldn't get a hold of the principal. And finally, the special ed person called me back and they said, no, he wasn't 6. I mean, he didn't turn 6 until September 30th. So we really don't have to have him in school. And so I used that SPED text chat that we've told you about. And I was able to chat with people. It's TEA has people that you can call them or you can chat with them or you can email them. And we chatted and she sent me right to the student accounting handbook, showed me that the school was wrong. And I was able to cut and paste that into an email to the special ed person and the principal. And it got taken care of right away. But that's just an instance of how, if you know your rights or know how to reach out to somebody that knows, because I don't know everything and it's not all black and white. There's lots of gray area. So I just wanted to share that, just because that just shows how much you need to know your rights or know who to reach out to if you think something doesn't sound right.
Absolutely, Leslie. Couldn't agree with you more. And it's so true. I think that, the site to chat with them, Jennifer, Leslie's going to type it in the chat box, but it's called SPED Text. And she'll type that in the chat box for you. But I'm glad you shared that story. I'm sure that parent was so grateful. And it's just so important to make sure that you do know what's going on. And I know that parent was so appreciative. So keep in mind that during your ARD meetings, what they're focusing on is the IEP. That's the individualized education plan. And that's really the cornerstone, the centerpiece of that federal legislation that I was just talking about, the IDEA. The purpose of IDEA is to ensure that children with disabilities have that free, appropriate public education. And that has to emphasize special education and related services to make sure that it is meeting those unique needs. And the goal is to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. So you have to think of that IEP as a contract. It's a contract between you and the school. So perfect example, I'm in the midst of moving this week from one apartment complex to another. I just signed a new lease. That's the contract between me and the building. Well, that contract with the school is in regards to your child. So it's your role as the parent to make sure that you participate in that IEP meeting. And you have to understand what you're agreeing to. If there was something in the lease that I didn't understand before I signed it, I emailed them and I made sure I got my answer back in writing, because the last time I rented an apartment was 11 years ago. Well, leases have changed a lot in 11 years. So I needed to understand everything. And that's really important for you all to understand everything as well. So tip number 4. What should you do before the ARD IEP meeting? Make sure that you gather information. You want to get draft copies of evaluations. Where's your child currently at? If you don't know what their present levels of academic achievement are and where they're performing at, how can you plan goals? What other materials might you need? Is there a behavior plan in place for your child? How is that working? Do they have autism safeguards and not safeguards? Do they have an autism plan? Are there special accommodations for your child? You want to make sure that all of that is information that you have so it can be reviewed at the ARD meeting. Maybe nothing needs to change. Maybe it needs to be updated. Maybe there's something that you've noticed from the previous meeting that maybe now is recurring. A perfect example of that, I was talking to a parent today. Her daughter has dyslexia, and child's in middle school. Everything was going beautifully last year. They did not have an ARD, an IEP. They had a 504 plan. And for those of you who don't know what a 504 plan is, that means it basically levels that playing field. So it does not make changes to the curriculum, but maybe the student is allowed extra time. Maybe there's preferential seating. Maybe they get teachers' notes, things like that. Maybe assignments are broken down. So everything was going so well. Now they dismissed him. Well, guess what's happening? The grades are falling. His self-esteem, he doesn't feel good about it, or she doesn't feel good about herself. So what do you think I did? I referred her to Texas Project First and said she needs to put in writing that she needs to get together with the school. She needs to meet with the school, and there need to be supports in place again. Her daughter needs the help. So you want to make sure that you read through any documents ahead of time so that you know what people are going to be talking about. You know, highlight pages, that's fine. Put question marks, you know, if you don't understand something. Next tip.
Can I'm sorry.
Absolutely. No, please go ahead. Absolutely.
I've had a really busy day today. I had another parent today and was looking at the IEP, and the IEP said, I just want to stress how important the present levels of academic and performance are, because that's your starting point to develop good IEP goals. And the IEP, there was no PLAF because they said the child had never been in school, so there was no PLAF. And I'm like, well, that's why you do an evaluation, and
Right.
that's why you gather input from the parent. And so the child only had 3 goals. None of them were academic. They were all functional. The autism, the child has autism, and the autism supplement, it just had the 11 extra protections listed and that they were discussed, but didn't have any information specific to each one for that child. And so that's why it's really important to look at everything and know your rights and know what should be in that IEP before you agree to it.
Exactly, because you can't create a plan if you don't know where the child is at. That's exactly right, Leslie. No, please interrupt me anytime. You know that by now.
I just have a lot of stories today.
No, that's good. I love it. I'm with you. So tip number 5, evaluations. You need to understand that that all services that a child needs is based on that initial evaluation. So that any data collected and further assessments is after that evaluation. So say you're a parent on this call, or you know of someone, and this is the first time they're having an ARD meeting. You want to make sure that your child is evaluated on any possible concern that you have. It could be speech, it could be reading, it could be issues with math. So there's a timeline for that initial evaluation, and we talked about that in the last meeting, and it's also on texasprojectfirst.org. I just put the link in the website. But there are no required deadlines for any other requests for evaluations or re-evaluations. So if you feel your child needs a further evaluation, find out when it's going to be completed and make sure that you get it documented in the ARD minutes.
The only exception to that would be the 3-year reeval, if you
Right.
haven't had a reeval in 3 years. And then again, we talked about how they would do a read first and decide if they were going to do any new evaluation unless you had requested it.
Next slide. So I just typed a message to Jennifer because I know that you have some concerns. So at the very end, we list our email address, and Jennifer, Leslie, or I are happy to speak with you to set up a time to discuss your child's issues. So feel free. So you are so welcome. So tip number 6, it's meeting time. If possible, try not to go alone to the meeting. I realize sometimes you don't have a choice, but especially in the beginning, when you have like the first few ARD meetings, or if you're having some challenges or you're just really unsure, try to bring somebody with you, somebody preferably who knows your child. And you don't necessarily have to bring an advocate. Yes, that costs money and that can be expensive. I know I didn't have money for an advocate, but bring a friend or relative with you. They can be that second set of ears, that second set of eyes, and I think it really helps. Meet with them ahead of time. Let them know what your concerns are, because they can help you make sure that your questions are addressed. Maybe they can be in charge of taking notes, following the ARD agenda, and just to have that moral support during the meeting. Because when you're having those meetings, there's usually, 5 to 8 people from the school and then one of you. So to have another person can be really helpful. Take your child to the meeting. Granted, it's not until they turn 14 that they are required to be at the ARD meetings. But I think it's really important, even in elementary school or middle school, even if they just say hello for a few minutes, they don't have to stay the whole time, but they can introduce themselves to the people in the committee. And I think it's important that they do that. Even if your child is nonverbal, still bring them to the ARD. Because if they are nonverbal, they definitely need to have a technology evaluation, because they should be having some type of adaptive technology so that they can communicate.
And everybody at the IEP table doesn't necessarily know your child.
That's right. That's right. They definitely don't. Sometimes maybe somebody's out sick and they're bringing in somebody else because they have to have specific people at the ARD meeting. They're required to have that. Maybe that person doesn't even know your child. So bring them, even if it's just for a few minutes.
And it keeps the focus on the child, because we have to remember it's not about what the school wants. It's not about what we want, but it's about what's appropriate for the child. And so it really keeps it child focused.
Very, very important. Thank you for bringing that up, Leslie. So during the meeting, ask questions. I realize that sometimes not everyone might be as welcoming as Leslie and I are. We want parents to ask questions. I believe that schools do the best they can. I think that the schools have so much on their plate. They really do. And we encourage parents to work collaboratively with schools, work with teachers, work with paraprofessionals, work with the resource teacher, the speech therapist at the school, whoever is interacting with your child. It's important that everybody works together so that it's working together and not being driven apart. So it's important to know that, you are an important part of that committee. It's okay to ask questions. And if you don't understand something, you have to make sure that you ask them, what does it mean? So Leslie just texted me that she lost power. So now I am going to share my screen. Hold on one second. And let me bring up my, hold on one second. Let me go back and see what I was on. The joys of living in Houston, right? So bear with me. Okay, so ask questions. Okay, so hold on, that's Leslie. One moment, please. I think she's logging back in. So we're going to wait for just a moment for Leslie to log back in so she can share her screen. And let me get my screen instead. Hold on one second. Can you all see the screen that I'm showing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see it. Okay, great. Oh, let me go to slideshow. One moment, please. Whoops. Okay, I don't know why it's doing that. Oh my goodness, my apologies for these technical difficulties. Okay, let me try again. Okay, can everybody see my screen now? No, you can't. Okay, let me try again. Okay, can everybody see it now?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry about that. I'm just going to keep it like this because for some reason it's not letting me do the other view. So what you want to do is, make sure that you ask those questions and ask for data. If the school says, oh, well, you don't need to do this, maybe your child doesn't need speech therapy. Well, where's the data to support that? And it's important that you ask those open-ended questions, or what is it going to take to make something happen? Because if you ask yes or no questions, unfortunately, you will get a yes or no answer. And that's what we don't want you to get, because it really doesn't allow for conversation. So the types of questions that you want to ask, they encourage the members of that ARD committee to make sure that they are brainstorming solutions. So let me go to the next slide. So during the school year, can everyone see tip number 8? Hopefully you can. If not, just let me know. So tip number 8 Make sure that you meet and communicate all year with the staff. I think that it's really important that you want to make sure you know what's going on throughout the year, not just right before your child's ARD meeting. What I used to do, and my son is 27, as you know, what I used to do is I would wait until about 2 or 3 weeks into the school year, and then I would send an email to his teachers introducing myself and letting them know that I realize their plates are very full. They have a lot of people, a lot of students that they're managing, but I just want to introduce them to Ryan because I want to make sure they know that he has autism, he has accommodations, he has intellectual disabilities, and what support he needs to be successful in class. So you just want to make sure that the only time that you're meeting with people is not at the ARD meeting. You want to work together, develop goals together, set up a communication system that works for you. I always found that having a folder back and forth worked really, really well. And I'm not saying that the teacher is going to be able to write a note in every day. That's almost impossible because these teachers, they're so overloaded. Class sizes get so big, but maybe every few days if they can write a quick note or email. I love email personally, and that worked really well for me. So just set up something that works well, both for you and the teacher. I know that since, my son has been out of school, they have these online websites that you can communicate with teachers on. I didn't have that when my son went to school, but choose a system that works best for you. Give the teacher a few days to respond. If something is immediate, put in the subject line, ASAP, as soon as possible, so that you can make sure that they will hopefully address your concern by the end of the day or by the following school day. So I guess we permanently lost Leslie. So I am going to, and I see we had a couple more people joining us. Thank you so much. Tip number 9, document, document, document. It is so important that everything be put in writing. If it's not written down, if it's not in those ARD minutes, those meeting minutes, somebody could say maybe it never happened. And it's important to make sure that what you said is what is in those ARD minutes. So at the end of each meeting, what the person who is taking the notes, and they're usually putting it into a laptop or a computer, you want to make sure that what you said is what you meant and what's in the minutes. Make sure that you read and highlight those procedural safeguards about prior written notice. Know your rights on page 2. We talked about that last week. And those procedural safeguards, again, the link is at the bottom on that website, Texas Project First. And just a quick, reminder that prior written notice means that if the school is required to give you 5 written days notice if they are proposing or refusing to provide a service. Now, I will tell you this, there were times, especially as my son got older and I was really comfortable at ARD meetings and had great relationship with the schools, that they, by accident, forgot to send me an email saying, hey, can we have an ARD meeting on this day? So no problem. I'm happy to have the ARD meeting. If it worked out for my schedule, I wasn't hung up on making sure that I had 5 days notice. So there are exceptions to that. But if the school is all of a sudden telling you your child doesn't need speech therapy, or we now want them to switch classes. You need to make sure that you are given that 5 days notice, and you need to make sure that you understand what it is and why. You need to know what is going on with your child. Leslie, I know that you're back on. I'm probably, if you want to take over at this point, and I'll just advance the slides for you. Does that work out okay?
Yeah,
Okay, great.
that'll be good.
So we're now on, and I can't get it to do,
The slideshow.
yeah, I don't know why. I'm not going to worry about it. So tip number
Okay.
10, go Leslie.
Okay, let me get this, see if I can get this out of the way here. It's really important to learn about your child's disability and the special education process. I encourage you to attend trainings like these, and there are a lot of other trainings out there by different parent organizations. I still do trainings. Of course, now most of the trainings I attend now are focused on adults with disabilities, but I have to tell you, I learn something new every day. And so if you can join, even if it's just on Facebook, there are a lot of great Facebook groups that I'm in, and you can do it by your area. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. Katie Autism has a great Facebook group. And anyway, when you're on these groups, different people post different trainings that are coming up. A lot of times school districts provide training throughout the year too. So, and a lot of times they have really good speakers also. Another thing to try is going to conferences. Family to Family is going to have a big conference coming up in January, I believe. And we
Yes.
have resource fair where different organizations have a table and you can talk to different people about different things. And then we'll have breakout sessions where you can learn about different things in person also. I also really encourage you to use the ARD agenda. There's one on Texas Project First, but it just kind of helps you know the flow of the meeting. You know, they shouldn't be talking about placement before they've talked about everything else. That's the last thing you decide. It helps to get educated, like extended school year services. I see a lot of IEPs where that's already checked, not needed. And we don't know if it's not needed at this time right now. So they should be keeping data, and you should try to keep some data too, like if your children have trouble going back after breaks. So definitely get educated, know the ARD agenda, bring it with you. A lot of schools will have one out on the table, some don't. And definitely use all the tools that we've talked about, like the guide to the ARD process, your procedural safeguards. There's a dispute resolution handbook. I really like the IDEA manual because it's very parent friendly. And it has the sample letters in there. I love Texas Project First. We're updating all those pages because we moved it over. That was a website that we created with a grant from TEA, and it was done by parents for parents. But all of these different tools are going to give you a different perspective and say it in a different way where it might click with you. Okay,
And if I could
Judy.
just add something that
Yeah,
sometimes, like if you're at an ARD meeting and you realize what you're being told is incorrect, sometimes the person just doesn't realize.
exactly.
You know, there's been so much turnover these last few years with special education in the schools, and you don't know what you don't know sometimes. So if someone isn't trained properly, they might be misinforming you. So you really need to make sure that you understand. It's no different than when you go to the doctor. Sure, you're going to take your doctor's advice, but maybe you get a second opinion. Or if you question what they're telling you, you do some research on your own. It's no different than this. Would you like me to go to the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Whoops. What were we just on? Get educated. So now we're
Yes.
going to go to organization.
Yeah, I'm not very organized, but I got more organized as time went on. I used binders. You can, I think Judy uses an accordion file, whatever works for you. But if you
Yep.
keep everything organized, that way you can flip to it very easily in your ARD meeting, take the information with you. You may have work samples, evaluations, IEPs, report cards, any notes or anything, just have it. I like to use a binder and tab the binder so you can find things really easily. So that is very helpful. Okay, next
For
slide.
me, I had a binder, and then I had like those plastic folders where I could put information in there, and that really helped. And then I always saved every single email that I ever had with the teachers.
Right, and that's really important because like we have said in the other trainings, if it's not written down somewhere, it's probably not going to happen. So I really like when I was communicating with the principal from that elementary today, I put everything in the email to her. And of course, she picked up the phone and called me, and she gave me a lot of information. So the first thing I did when I hung up the phone was to email her back and say, per our conversation today, I understood that you were going to do this, this, and that, and please respond to me in writing. So that's another thing that helps. And another thing is, if you're in an ARD meeting and somebody says something that they're going to do or not going to do, or something that's important, just look at the person that's taking the minutes and say, would you please note that in the minutes that Miss Jones said that she would write in the communication book to me daily, or whatever it is, put it, at least get it somewhere in the minutes if it's something important. I mean, you don't want them writing a book, but if it's something important, it needs to be in writing. Tip number 12, if you disagree with the ARD committee, and our next session is all about what you can do when you disagree, but I just want everybody to know that you can disagree. It's okay. But even if you disagree, you have to take the next step, because if you disagree and do nothing, that's the same thing as agreeing with them. Because if you disagree and do nothing, they get to do what they feel is best. So I'm not saying disagree about every little thing, but if things aren't happening and if it's something very important, disagree. If you don't agree with the evaluation, you can request an independent evaluation at the school's expense. If you don't agree with the program or the services, or maybe the mom that I was talking to today, I encouraged her to go and observe. And when she went and observed, none of the accommodations, she couldn't see that any of the accommodations listed in the IEP were being provided. So if you don't agree with anything that's important, you want to make sure you're given the opportunity to write that down, why you don't agree, and make sure your disagreement is known. And I know there were a lot of problems during COVID when the ARD meetings were by Zoom or whatever. If you're not sure, say, give me a copy. I'm going to take a copy of the IEP home and read it over. And they don't like you to do that. they'll tell, some schools will even tell you you can't do that, but you can. And if they don't, then I would disagree. Then, because if you disagree, then there's a 10-day recess anyway. So if you don't understand what's happening in a meeting, or you don't feel, or you feel like they've rushed you through, there are no time limits on ARDs. I mean, you want to prepare and be organized and meet beforehand. So hopefully the ARD meeting isn't a marathon ARD meeting. But if they say, oh, we only have an hour today, well, they only have an hour, but if you're not through and they haven't answered all your questions, they shouldn't expect you to agree or disagree. And at that point, you could table the ARD meeting and come back to finish it. And again, if you do disagree, it's very important to make sure that there is a written statement reflected in the IEP. Because if you don't have that, they might think you agree with them. Okay, Judy.
Yeah, and we realize that that can be uncomfortable to disagree with somebody. I mean, we understand that, but this is your child, and you have to do what works best so that they're getting the support that they need. So you can always just respectfully disagree, and that's okay. Did you want me to go to the next slide?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, let's see. There you go.
I can't remember if we've talked at all about this, but I think it's really important to create a vision for your child. And you may have a child that can help you with that. And it could change over the years, but the whole idea of IDEA is to prepare your child for higher education, training and employment, and independent living as much as possible. So I kind of shared that my vision was for Cameron to, grow up and live in the community and be a member of the community and be happy and be part of the community. And of course, it can change every year too, but if they know the vision for your child, that helps drive the IEP meeting, because you wouldn't want, if your vision is for your child to go to college, of course, we all need to be realistic, but we can't nobody has a crystal ball when they're very young, but, you want to make sure they're taking the right classes and they're not having curriculum modifications, that they're only having accommodations. So when you create a vision, it's sort of like the map to get to where you want your child to be when they leave the public school. What would you want for your child if they didn't have a disability? I think it's really important to have high expectations and, just like you would if they didn't have a disability. And a lot of people that they don't have a clear vision, and when that bus stops coming, it's really like falling off a cliff if your child isn't prepared for whatever is coming next. So it's really, even if you have a young child, it's important to start planning for the future now. Just think about what your hopes and dreams are, or what your child's hopes and dreams are. What's the plan for when school's over? And again, like, it could change.
And if I could just add to that about it changing.
Yes.
So, I always thought that my son was maybe going to go to maybe a junior college. And then I could see, academics just really wasn't his thing. He was more of the working type. And that was fine with me. What I didn't want was for him to graduate to the living room couch. So then I looked at a program that was not a junior college, but it was like you would get a certificate and you would be with other young adults and do projects and things like that. And then I thought, you know what? He really doesn't want that either. And we would talk about it. So what we did do is he stayed an extra year in high school, and we live in the Meyerland area. So he stayed an extra year at Bel Air High School. He took some elective classes. He volunteered in the library. He worked in the kitchen. And then the following year, HISD started a post high school program, and they did little internships. Maybe they would go to Goodwill. Maybe they would go to the library and they would sort books. They would go to a restaurant and fold pizza boxes, do portioning, things like that. And I think that that really worked out well for him, because through one of those internships, he actually ended up being hired by a neighboring school. And it worked out really, really well for him. And he worked there for 3 years. So, even my vision for him changed. None of us knows what the future holds, but it's just important that you realize that no one ever rises to low expectations. And you always want your child, your loved one, to lead what we call a meaningful life. And meaningful means different things to different people. For some, maybe it's working 3 or 4 hours a week and then doing volunteering. That, I think, is incredible. I love volunteering. For other people, it's going to a junior college. For some, it's going to a vocational program. And for some, it's working, like my son. Go ahead, Leslie.
Yeah, and one on the different end of the spectrum, like my son Cameron, he doesn't have a lot of language and he knows no danger, but he can do a lot of things. So he did stay for the 18+ program in school, and we worked on getting him as independent as possible to make sure his behaviors were in check. He had a way to communicate. He could follow directions. He was independent, very independent in the bathroom, because I wanted to make sure he could get into a really good day HAP program that does volunteer and go out into the community. They pack food boxes for Katie Christian Ministries. Some people go to the pizza place and fold pizza boxes. They even have in-house things for people who don't want to go out. Another example is a friend of ours that lived, I believe they were in Katy. Their son had Down syndrome. He went away to a 4-year college program for people with intellectual disabilities. And he stayed there and became very independent, came back and is living in an apartment with the help of his family who lives nearby, and his Medicaid waiver program. So just keep that in mind, because you have to know where you're going. And like Judy said, we don't want them to graduate to the couch. I'm ready, Judy.
Thank you.
And speaking of Medicaid waiver programs, don't wait, because unfortunately in Texas, the waiting list is 15 to 20 years long. So if your child is not on the interest list for the Medicaid waiver programs in Texas, get them on the waiting list. They don't look at the parent's income. They only look at the child or the adult's income. And the wait is long, but you want to be on the waiting list, because if you need these services, when you do come to the top of the list, you're going to need them then, not 20 years later. And if you don't need them, you just say no, thank you. And a lot of people, I'm one, I knew about these waivers before he was 5, and I didn't sign him up until somebody sat me down and said, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Medicaid and your income. I didn't understand that because when you read the information on the websites or whatever, it says they have to be Medicaid eligible, which that's two-pronged. You know, do they have a disability and do they meet the income requirements? Well, it waives off the parent's income. So Cameron got on the class waiver when he was a teenager, and that made him Medicaid eligible, because you do have to stay Medicaid eligible to stay on any of the waivers.
We talked about that a little bit last week. And if you don't understand what you're saying, you need to email us. I'll put our email addresses in the chat, because we need to send you information to make sure that your kids are on these interest lists.
Yes, and we have a list of all the waivers. There's a great website where you can compare the different waivers. I encourage you to get on any of the waiting lists that you feel would apply. You can be on many waiting lists. Cameron came up on the class program first. We accepted that. He came up later on the HCS list, and then I had to decide, do we want to stay on class or switch to HCS? So, you know, there's choices out there, and you just definitely get on the waiting list. Don't wait. Okay, Judy.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's, so there are different numbers. The one we have down for HCS and Texas Home Living, that is for Harris County. And if you need it for a different county, we can help you find that. The Health and Human Services has a website where they list all of the, they call them LIDAs, the local authorities for IDD. And the class waiver is for all of the state of Texas. And there are other waivers. There's a deaf-blind waiver. There's the STAR Plus waiver for people 21 and over who are very medically involved. There's the MDCP, which is the medically dependent children's waiver, which is for children who have a lot of medical issues also. Okay.
Hold on, I just need to mute Sylvia real quick. Hold on 1 second. There we go.
Okay.
We don't really need, yeah.
Yeah, that's the list. But another thing I encourage you to do, if you want to find out more about this and a lot of different things, is go to Navigate Life Texas.
I'll type that in the chat box.
Yes, and you can search by topic. And so if you put in waivers, or if you put in special needs trust, or anything you want to know anything about, they have great articles. That's another website that we worked on through Health and Human Services. And most of the stuff was done by parents who have children with disabilities.
And it's in like 50,000 different languages. It's amazing. Thanks to our friends at Google.
Yes.
So it's really, really helpful. But I just put the website in the chat box.
Great. And I think that's the last slide, Judy.
It is.
Anybody has questions or whatever?
Yes, by all means. And I have put the link for the survey in the chat box. And you can also use the QR code. Again, we know the Astros are playing. And I know that we've lost a couple of people. But does anyone have any questions? I know that a couple of you have sent private messages, and I believe I answered the questions, but if not, feel free to leave, to email us. There are our email addresses, and please make sure that you email us with the questions, because we want to make sure that you're getting the help that you need. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask?
Yes, I have a question. This is Jean.
Sure. Hi, Jean.
Hi. Somebody had mentioned, my son is 3, and his ARD is tomorrow, his first ARD.
Mhm.
So thank you for, the meeting.
Oh, our pleasure.
So I have a question. Somebody mentioned to me something about asking for a revised ARD, because they did the evaluation, which I think was pretty comprehensive,
Mhm.
except the fact they said he didn't need OT, which I'm going to ask for an independent OT evaluation for him.
Mhm.
But then the goals that they put in the IEP plan, I feel like because the evaluation was kind of short, I feel like some of them he already knows, and some of them he's going to master very quickly because he like learns very fast. So I don't want a plan that's in place, and they keep following it for maybe 6 months or so, and he's kind of like stagnant. So somebody told me that I can ask for like a revised ARD meeting.
Do you mean like an independent evaluation?
No, not an independent evaluation. Basically, like I guess like a follow-up meeting that comes earlier than maybe every year or every
Yeah,
six
you can
months.
request an ARD meeting at every time, but there are, if you look at the IDEA handbook, there are some things that you could, if you're all in agreement, just revise the ARD without having an ARD meeting. But
Okay.
parents can request an ARD meeting at every time. Of course, you don't want to have them all the time, only if you need to
Right.
update IEP goals, change them, or if you're having behaviors, you could have an ARD meeting to request a functional behavioral assessment. But yes, you can do that. And in the IDEA parent handbook, I believe there's something about that in there. So if you're all in agreement and it's not really like a change of placement or anything like that, yeah, they could change the IEP goals at any time if he's already mastered them.
Right. Okay. And without necessarily having to convene a meeting.
Right.
Okay. Okay. All
Yeah, I
right,
just wanted to
thanks.
make sure it wasn't an independent evaluation.
No.
Yeah.
No, but an independent evaluation is a good idea if you feel he does need OT and they've said no.
Right.
Just remember on all of the therapies like that, it
Mhm.
has to be educationally relevant and
Right.
not just medically.
Yeah.
And if you do have insurance that will pay for private therapy, it's going to be a much higher quality. But if he does, I mean, even if there was an OT consult to come in and say, oh, he's having trouble writing, we need a pencil grip.
Exactly.
Yes.
You know,
That's what they
something,
did for my son. So he got OT when he was very, very young, and then it was not educationally relevant. And you know what? At that point, I didn't care. I was more focused on the speech, the language, the social skills.
Mhm.
They kind of have to decide what's most important. And what I found I could do was either after school or on the weekends, I would buy like stringing beads, or I would do things at home to work on those occupational therapy skills.
Okay.
but if he's real young, they should have an OT
Right.
coming into the classroom and,
At least
observing the
advising
kid.
the teacher
Yes,
and
on
giving the
what to
teacher
do.
some tips.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
But yeah,
Yeah.
he's young at this point. But yeah, a lot of times they use that it's not educationally
Right.
relevant.
That's what they were trying to say on the
And you can
initial
ask
ARD
for,
meeting.
yeah, you can ask for a consult. Absolutely.
But
Okay.
I would get, if you really feel he needs occupational therapy to benefit in the public school, then get an IEE at the school's expense. And you get to pick the person who does it as long as they have the appropriate credentials and will agree to do a contract for payment with the school district.
Okay. All right.
And then you're getting that second opinion by
Mhm.
somebody who is strictly looking at the needs of your child.
Right. All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. We're glad you joined us.
Thanks.
Well, we are still going to have the final class next Wednesday on the 26th. And we know the Astros are playing, but this email and these flyers have gone out to God knows how many people. And for us to change it now would be really next to impossible. So we thank you so much for joining us. We're very glad that you took the time to invest tonight. And Leslie, we're happy you have your power back on.
We've just been having these every couple of days. I don't know if they're laying wire somewhere, but it cuts
Sure.
off for just a few minutes. So sorry about that.
Oh, no worries at all. No
And
worries.
feel free to reach out to us through email or phone at
Yes.
Family to Family Network if you want to talk to us about something specific.
Yes, one of you had put in the chat box about that, and we're happy to do that. So have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, and you as well.
Bye.